What's up and welcome back to the neighborhood. This is the first video in a new series we're starting on the channel. We're calling the series Filling the Hole Left by Souls. The idea behind the series came from the fact that I am a huge fan of the FromSoft games and the genre that they pioneered, which the gaming community and industry refers to as Souls-like. But FromSoft can only make games so fast, and now that Armored Core has made its grand return, we may get Dark Souls style games from them even less frequently. With this being the case, I had to turn to the ever-growing pool of games that have been inspired by or taken ideas from games like Elden Ring, Bloodborne, or Demon's Souls. At this point, I have played a lot of these games, and I have no intention of stopping anytime soon. Some of them are fun, worthwhile experiences, while others are not. So this series of videos is going to be me sharing my opinions on the Souls-like games I have played and letting you know if I think they're worth your time and/or money. With all that being said, let's dive into the first game I'm going to talk about in this series, Lies of P. Lies of P is a game that was developed by NeoWiz Games and Round 8 Studio and is loosely based on the 1883 Italian novel The Adventures of Pinocchio. This unique theme does a lot to set this game apart when compared to its peers. As far as gameplay, Lies of P is a third-person action game with a focus on melee combat. The combat consists of dodging, blocking, and parrying enemy attacks to create opportunities to attack and do damage yourself. The game utilizes a few different mechanics to customize the way you play. There's a large amount of weapons that are made up of a handle and a blade component. These components can be mixed and matched to fit the style of play you prefer. There are also different stats you can level up to grow your character into the build you enjoy most, along with a skill tree called the P organ that I had to say out loud at least once in this video. There's also a system called the Legion arm, where you're able to swap out and upgrade the ability on your left arm. These can be a shield, a grappling hook, a flamethrower, etc. All of these systems come together to allow the player flexibility in how they want to build their character and approach combat situations. Outside of combat, there is a significant focus on exploration with items hidden throughout the levels as well as secrets and shortcuts to find. The story is less obtuse than the From games, with many characters offering up exposition on what is happening in the world as you progress through the adventure. Some of the character-specific quests and stories can still be a little obtuse and tough to follow, but the main storyline of the game is told in a pretty straightforward manner. So what do I like about this game? Quite a lot actually, starting with the setting and visuals. Lies of P looks amazing. It's probably one of the best looking Souls-like games out there right now, with Bluepoint's Demon's Souls remake still holding the title. Outside of the fidelity of the game, the style is also incredible. Lies of P has often been referred to as Pinocchio Bloodborne, and the main reason for that name is the aesthetic of the game. The dark and moody Industrial Revolution vibes that the city of Krat give off are reminiscent of Bloodborne's city of Yharnam in all the right ways. The enemy and boss designs in this game are also quite memorable. The narrative in Lies of P is basically a version of the what happens when robots turn on their masters story structure. But since it's set in the world of Pinocchio, robots are called puppets, and their designs reflect this. Most of the bosses and enemies in the game behave like a malfunctioning robot marionette, and it has a very eerie effect that fits the game's tone extremely well. An interesting system that this game implements is the humanity system. Because the player character is essentially Pinocchio, the game gives you opportunities to make choices and interact with objects that will affect your humanity. Things like choosing to lie to an NPC or not, listening to music at your home base, and defeating certain bosses will affect your level of humanity. And humanity has an effect on which ending you will get. While it isn't a mechanic that drastically alters the genre, it was a really interesting way to add flavor to the world and its characters. I generally like the combat in this game a lot. I'll talk about a few of its weak points when I get into the negatives, but for now, I want to talk about what I enjoyed about it. The various systems allow for a lot of player creativity, something I mentioned earlier in the video. And for the most part, I felt like the enemy and boss encounters were fair and balanced, which is essential for a game like this. Lies of P took the parry idea from Sekiro and the rally mechanic from Bloodborne, and put them both into their combat system. This works a lot of the time, and when you add in all the different weapons and variations those weapons can have, it gives the combat a robust feeling that some action games lack. There's a summoning system for most of the bosses where you can summon an NPC character to help you fight the boss. This is really helpful as some of the bosses can be extremely challenging to take on one-on-one. Also, the throwable items and buffs you can give your weapon are actually really impactful in Lies of P, and can be the difference between success or failure in a tough fight. The level design in this game is done really well. It's similar to Demon's Souls or Bloodborne, where you have a main resting point and you'll be unlocking shortcuts that lead back to it as you explore the level. Some of the levels are more linear with resting places along the way, but a lot of the game goes the route of shortcuts, and I enjoyed that. None of the levels are massively open. This isn't Elden Ring, but I don't think that's a bad thing. The levels are crafted to guide the player down a set path, allowing for the developers to place encounters and NPCs where they want them to be. Some of the later areas started to wear thin as I made my way through this 30-hour game, but for the most part, I enjoyed exploring the interesting and spooky world that Lies of P had to offer. So what are some of the things I didn't like about this game? One of the biggest negatives is a lack of multiplayer. Specifically for me, co-op, but even some sort of PvP would have been nice. I know this is the developer's first crack at this type of game, and they got so much right that it's hard to complain, but co-op would have gone a long way to alleviate my next complaint. The endgame bosses. Before you comment and tell me to get good, I'll just go ahead and say that I appreciate difficulty in games. I like a good challenge, and I appreciate that FromSoft is unwavering in its approach to difficulty. However, From has gotten better with each of their releases about baking mechanics into the game that will allow the player to overcome the odds stacked against them. One of these is being able to summon other players into boss fights. Lies of P lacks this component and some of the other mechanics that From has included in their recent games, and because of that, the last few bosses are brutal. Most of the guides online utilize some form of cheese method, or they advise you to spam throwables. This isn't a fun note to end your game on, and for me, it left a bit of a sour taste as the game came to a close. Another reason why these bosses can be tough, aside from their hyper-aggression and high damage, is that the combat system comes with some negatives along with those positives I spoke about earlier. Because the game has so many things going on with the combat, the systems can get in the way of each other. You can technically recover health after being hit, but a lot of the time the enemy doesn't give you the time required to do that. And while I think the parry system in this game is good and mostly satisfying, it could use some refinement. The parry window is either too small or slightly off in its timing, and I never felt like I had mastered it like I did with the parry system in Sekiro. This is frustrating when the late game bosses demand multiple perfect parries to avoid massive damage or staggers. Like I said, this is the first attempt at a game like this from this studio, and it was really ambitious for a first attempt. I think they got the majority of what they tried to do right, but there is some room for improvement. From what I've seen, they're really good about listening to their players and addressing their concerns, so I have high hopes that their games will only get better from here. If From Software games are the S tier that we're measuring against, I put Lies of P at an A. It is an incredible game that understands what makes this kind of genre great. As a first attempt from a studio, it's mind-blowing how well this game turned out. There are some pain points and some room for improvement, but those are small in comparison to what Lies of P gets right. I would highly recommend this game, and I can't wait to see what Round 8 and NeoWiz do next. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment and let me know what you thought about Lies of P. Also, hitting the like button lets me know you want to see more content like this in the future. If you want to go above and beyond, consider subscribing to our channel so you can keep up with all of our future videos. And if you want to hear more of my thoughts and opinions about video games, check out our podcast by searching Your Friendly Neighborhood Gamers on your podcast platform of choice, or catching them here on our channel. With that, I'll leave you with a reminder to stay friendly, gamers.